What is up, everyone? Whether you're in the queue for your Holo Icon pack, your rebound pack, which will be a playoff pack, or watching the stream elsewhere, welcome. Happy Thursday. Excited to have you here. Today is a huge day for NBA Top Shot, the final Holo Icon drop of the 2021 NBA season, and excited to share this moment with you all. Some excellent moments in these packs, some incredible challenge rewards, as you all know. And I'm fortunate, blessed, humbled to be joined today by one of my favorite NBA commentators of the last 10 years, JE Skeets. Skeets, welcome to the show, man.
What's up? How's it going, Jacob? Good luck to you. Good luck to you. Good luck to you. Good luck to you. That's to everybody out there as they're getting their number in the queue here now. As I think we hit the top of the hour. It should be happening. So hopefully a lot of you are lucky out there.
Seeing my phone blow up, a lot of friends not getting good queue spots. Can't help you. You know, there are these rumors out there that we can help with influencer packs. Not the case. I'm sorry. Get in the queue.
Yeah. So how many? It's like what, 2,500 packs for the Holo Icon, and I think the last I saw in terms of eligibility, it was just over 9,000 ballpark. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I ran the numbers. A 27% shot of getting a Holo Icon pack. But one thing that we're excited about, the blow of not getting the Holo Icon, a little bit cushioned today because those playoff packs are epic, and everyone in the queue will be able to walk away with one of those at the very least. So
yes, it's not, you want the Holo Icon, but if you're a little higher than 2,500, you still get the playoff pack, which isn't bad, which actually has like some incredible moments in it. Again, I'm wishing everybody got a low number out there. I truly am. But yeah, it's not a bad sort of runner-up prize, I guess, a playoff pack, because you can pull some wicked moments in there.
Yeah, more than a participation trophy for sure.
Yeah.
Skeets, some incredible NBA action. There's so many different places to start. Let's start with the breaking news. Rick Carlisle out as coach of the Dallas Mavericks. You know, there's been some turmoil. I saw a tweet earlier that I found quite funny. Something along the lines of the Mavs were able to push the Clips to 7, but the Athletic took care of the Mavs in 3 days.
Yeah.
Explosive report earlier in the week, citing some dysfunction in the front office between Haralabob Vulgaris and Donnie Nelson. Mark Cuban, quick to retort on Twitter saying this story is BS.
Yep.
Where there's smoke, there's fire, evidently, because both of those guys are gone. And as of this morning, Rick Carlisle, who's been with the team for, I want to say, 13 years, won a championship in 2011. He's out. So did you see this coming? Are you shocked? Where do you stand?
Well, yeah, the No Dunks podcast that I do daily with the guys, we are under the Athletic umbrella. Shout out to the Athletic. And yeah, that column that dropped on, I think it was Monday, if I have my timeline right, was Tim Cato and Sam Amick of the Athletic reporting about, the friction there, that rift maybe in the Mavs front office between Haralabob and then Donnie Nelson, and then even like Luka in the mix, and who's Cuban listening to, and all that, right? So we had Tim Cato on the show earlier in the week after that report, that bombshell dropped, and he said at the time, this was prior to Donnie Nelson deciding to move on. He's like, look, things are going to happen in the front office, but nowhere. And I went back and listened to it and watched it. Did like Tim sort of suggest Rick Carlisle was going to move on. He was under contract, I believe, for 2 more years. So that's the shocking part. One of the rare guys, Jacob, in the league that felt like, and maybe it's even true because he is ultimately leaving, that was just like perfect job security. I mean, it's Pop, it's Spo, it's Rick Carlisle, and now after Stotts is gone and Brad Stevens has moved into a different position with the Celtics, it's like that's sort of it. So no, this was totally out of left field, the Rick Carlisle part of this equation. The other part, not so much, trying to find a new president of basketball operations, and I guess who will ultimately have the decision when it comes to finding a new coach now. This is the NBA over the last 2 days, not only with Top Shot going crazy with the packs and the final Holo Icon here, but just the news that's nonstop with Chris Paul and then Kawhi and what's happening in these series, crazy games, and then all of these coaching vacancies now. It's been a wild 48 hours here for the NBA, and I guess Top Shot included.
It really has. I think we're destined through the weekend to just have more drama, right? Obviously, we've got a big game 6 tonight. Milwaukee needs to pull it out. Obviously, another esteemed coach on the hot seat there with Mike Budenholzer. And I think if you're following Twitter these days, or this hour, I guess, the murmurs are only getting louder now that Rick Carlisle is on the market. Let's dial the clock back to earlier in the week. Kevin Durant, arguably his signature performance of the entire career, right? 49 points, 17 rebounds, 10 assists in a must-win game that had, a ton on the line for both of those franchises. Going into tonight, there are kind of questions about how many minutes are you going to play James Harden, knowing that you have Game 7 as a fallback if you don't pull it out tonight. What are your expectations for tonight's game?
It's tough. I mean, I've been struggling with all of these series, if I'm being completely honest. Just when you think one team has it figured out, something happens where it's the opposite, either an injury, or then you're like, oh, well, Kawhi's out. Clippers are in trouble. They pull off the Game 5 victory. So it's tough. I would expect, of course, you're going to hope that for a bounce back performance from the Bucks. I want to see them attack Harden when he's out there. And what I mean by that is, I think Harden's going to have a better offensive game if he plays in this, and by all accounts, he's going to again. And he played a ton of minutes there in Game 5, despite the hamstring injury. He shot 1 of 10. He wasn't great offensively, for James Harden, who's like a walking bucket and can set up guys left and right. He'll play better there, but I thought the Bucks let him off the hook. Not really putting him in space, hunting him, going at him. James Harden is not an incredible defender to begin with, unless we're talking about in the post, where we saw that moment where Giannis late in the game, crunch time, starts backing him up, and Harden's like waving off the help. He's like, I can't do a whole lot right now, maybe on one leg, but I can do this. I'm strong as an ox. I can take him here in the post. And, Giannis settled for the fadeaway on the baseline. That came up short. But they need to put him in space. And, he was so many times just hanging out on, PJ Tucker, not a part of the action. And that's great, right? I mean, that's what he wants to do on the defensive end. So I think if you're a Bucks fan, fingers crossed that Coach Bud and that system there will try and exploit that a little bit more. But it's a bit of a catch-22 because the Bucks are at their best when the ball's zipping around, it's moving, and they don't want to get too much into like that ISO game where it's like, okay, Drew or Chris or Giannis, okay, operate, go at it. But you want to maybe find a balance, especially with Harden, of just getting them into the action, I think. So to answer your question, I have no clue what happens. Could KD go for 50 again? Of course he could. He honestly could. Do I expect he will? No, just because that would be even more insane than the crazy stat line he had. I hope, just being as as a Raptors fan, I don't care really who wins at all. They're not in it, but man, I'd love to see a Game 7 go down on Saturday night. I'll tell you that. So we'll see here, because Coach Bud he's coaching for his life for sure. I mean, I think if they lose the series even in 7, he's likely gone, especially with all these openings now and all these available coaches that have a pedigree like Carlisle or someone else, maybe a D'Antoni to unlock them offensively. We'll see. But yeah, it should be a good game, because Steve Nash, in Game 5, he was like, okay, I don't want to play any guy 48 minutes, but this is the time to do it. Katie wants to, and we might have to win this. He obviously got contributions from Uncle Jeff there, hitting all those threes, and Blake Griffin was great again. So I guess if I'm guessing, this does go 7. I'll take a Bucks in a win at home, because they've been better at, slowing down KD in Milwaukee and of course getting the victories.
Right. Yeah. I think going back to last game, that was obviously last summer. They were supposed to end up with Bogdanovic, if you read the reports. And I think last game really crystallized how much they need a guy like him on their team, because when it comes to crunch time, you can go to Chris Middleton, you could go to Drew Holiday. I don't think either of those guys is necessarily the number one option on a team. And during the regular season, that's totally fine, because Giannis can do that. But when there becomes so much friction and so much clutter on the court, it's really hard to create your own shot. And I guess they're really relying these days on the Bryn Forbeses of the world to come out of the woodwork and hit shots. I mean, even Dante DiVincenzo, his absence is noticeably felt here, because
100%.
Who are you realistically with the Bucks? Who are you going to try to exploit Harden with right now? Because there's just not that one guy that can create his own shot.
Well, and that's the issue. I mean, in Milwaukee, PJ Tucker was hitting threes, so then you are putting a little pressure on the Nets, defense that way. But yeah, in Game 5, Tucker really did nothing offensively. But you need PJ Tucker out there in theory, to like try and slow KD. Now that didn't work. Nobody was slowing in KD down in Game 5. But yeah, it's a bit of a dilemma there. I'm not saying Tucker by no means shouldn't be playing. He has to play. He just has to hit those open threes in the corner. And I would just again like to try and just get Harden in more plays defensively. The same thing can be said for the Sixers series, where I mean that comeback was amazing last night, the 26-point comeback from the Hawks. But, that you should not be coming back, or you should not be able to not score when the other team has Trae and Lou Williams for a significant chunk of that second half as their backcourt. Like, you should be able to at least score on that. Slowing them is going to be an issue because those guys are buckets. But, yeah, that didn't happen, of course. The Sixers just went ice cold, and I think it was Embiid and Seth Curry as the only two guys to score in the second half. Like that, you saw that stat, and it's like, what? In a professional game, in a playoff game, only two guys scored in the entire second half. It's sort of like no wonder they lost. So you got to this is the playoffs, right? It's all about finding the weakness, taking advantage of it. And when you can, do it over and over and over and over again. It's not the regular season where everybody's got to eat, everybody's got to get their numbers, and everybody's got to have a chance at the All-Star game. No, you're winning games and you want to win playoff series and trying to win the championship. Like, you got to exploit those matchups when you can. But I don't think taking Harden in the post was the answer, is what I'm getting at. Get him out on the perimeter, and I think you can get by him, especially to begin with. And then now with a hamstring injury, he was not moving all that well.
Skeets, you're a Raptors fan. We know this, but you're also based in Atlanta. How surprised are you at the Hawks' both their run, but also how capably they're able to kind of hide Trae Young on defense? Because that was the big question going into the postseason, right? Everyone just anticipated, hey, they're just going to bully him every single possession.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to be the case. Is that a surprise to you? And now seeing this series with the Hawks in the driver's seat, I didn't see this coming, but I'd ask you as someone that gets to see the team a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say I had the Hawks in 6 or 7. No, I had the Sixers in 6. I thought it would be a series, but when they were up 2-1 and there was no answer to stopping Embiid, I went to Game 3 here in Atlanta, and I saw, Embiid was a monster. Ben Simmons actually took over that game at one stretch in the second half, where the Hawks just could make no rally whatsoever. The Sixers, anytime the Hawks got 1 or 2 buckets in a row, Sixers always had an answer. A lot of the time it was like Embiid just marching to the line because he's a monster. No, when they were down in Game 4, I thought it was over. I was like, well, that's 3-1, and then they go back to Philly and win. They somehow lose that. And then they're up 26 last night, and Embiid, hadn't missed in the first quarter, and, he's all hyped. And it's like, no, this is over too. They'll be up 3-2 now. Maybe they'll win here. The Hawks have impressed me so much. They never feel out of it. Everybody's contributing. Like, Trae is getting all the headlines, and rightfully so. 39 in Game 5, the 18 assists in Game 4. Always making the right play, it feels like, at the end of games, either setting up guys or scoring with the floater in Game 5. But it's like Bogdanovich has been big. John Collins, I think, is making himself a lot of money here suddenly. He had another great game, 19 and 11 last night. Capella doing his part. It's just like, I feel like just Nate McMillan he's just getting a little bit from everybody. And that's without DeAndre Hunter, who, when that happened, I was like, oh man, he was at times like their second or third best player this season. It's like, that's a tough hit. He gives it to you, a little bit offensively, and then he's one of their best perimeter defenders. So they have shocked me. They have absolutely impressed me. It's cool to see the city rally around them. And look, being here for 7 or 8 years, when it comes to Atlanta sports, it's usually they're in the lead, and then bad things happen and epic meltdowns. And it's flipped here, where I was listening to a Sixers podcast today, The Rights to Ricky Sanchez, a fantastic Sixers podcast. And I think it was their host Spike pointed out, these games, it should be the reverse. It should be maybe the Hawks up big because they're feeling it. The shots are dropping. They're playing loose, but they don't have the experience in a postseason or a playoff matchup that they give up these massive leads. And the Sixers, as that championship sort of pet, or at least a title contender, that's their hope, that they would come back. And it's the opposite. It's perplexing a little bit. I don't know what to expect in that Game 6 either. I mean, if you tell me that Ben Simmons goes another 5 of 15 at the line or 4 of 14, that's in play. We'll see. I mean, these series at times looked like they were a wrap, and now a lot of them are very, very interesting here as we hit into Game 6s, I guess, in most of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think, a lot bubbling in Philly. If they do get eliminated, I think you can expect sweeping changes.
Yep.
saw a tweet earlier today. Ben Simmons has missed 45 free throws in the playoffs. I think the Atlanta Hawks as a team have missed 35 the entire playoffs. So that right
and these
there,
are close games for the most part. I mean, these are points. Like he left 10 points on the board in Game 5 in a pivotal, 2-2 matchup. And I will be shocked if Nate McMillan here in Atlanta in Game 6, at some point, if they're down, 6 to 10 points, whatever it is, maybe a bit more, if they don't go to the hack-a-shack, the belt to Ben, whatever the heck people are calling this, like you'd be crazy not to, because he's totally in his head. He admitted as much, Ben Simmons did after Game 5. He's like, yeah, it's mental. And it's like, yikes. Like that, I don't know, does that just disappear after one night? Does he do a bunch of like meditation and some good yoga sessions or something, and he's suddenly up to 70%, 80% land? I doubt it. So I think Nate McMillan will do it. I think he'd be crazy not to if you get behind to just stem the tide and just put him there and see what happens. It's wild to watch, though, isn't it? It's weird to see a professional basketball player who he's so athletic. You could probably put him into like 6 other sports and give him a year, and he's like probably an elite athlete in that whatever sport you pick, because he's just like that much of an incredible like physical specimen. Like he's just 6'10", move at that speed and all that. But it's weird that you can go to the line, the loneliest place on earth, as Lily calls it, the guy I do the show with, and it can get in your head, and you can just go ice cold like you're Nick Anderson there, and suddenly you're missing 4 straight, and then you're never hitting another one, it feels like, again, or at least a big one. So it's definitely mental. I don't know what he does. I'd like to see him go underhand, Jacob.
I would too.
Everybody's saying switch hands, and maybe that's a possibility. Does he shoot with the wrong hand? I think he's got a great touch. We know he's an incredible passer. It'd be wild to see. You imagine he pulled out the underhand, little granny shot at the line. It'd be amazing.
I don't think we're going to see it from him. And I think this dates back to coming into the league from LSU, where the big talk, the big knock on him was he doesn't have a perimeter game. And at the time, his response was, I'm 20 years old, 19 years old. I'll develop it over time.
I didn't need one, and I'll get one. Yeah.
And then you see him in practice, he's hitting threes. And I think this is, I watched a Hawks practice years ago. Dwight Howard hit 28 straight free throws.
Sure.
I think the biggest misunderstanding of fans is that these guys don't practice it, and that these guys in practice aren't elite at it. I'm confident that if we saw Ben Simmons shooting free throws today in practice, he'd probably be an 80, 90%.
Probably, yeah.
But I think, to your point, like, this is why I never really bought the argument that Ben Simmons one day will be, at the very least, an average three-point shooter. You think about the guys around the league, be it Derrick Rose, be it Russell Westbrook, who for years struggled from the perimeter. At least they were willing to take the shot, right? They could live with the consequences of being a 30% three-point shooter, because they knew that it was important to keep defenses honest and create some space for others on the team. We haven't even seen that from Ben Simmons, a willingness to be a bad shooter, right? It's just, and look, he does so much great stuff on the court, and I don't mean this to be a barrage on Ben, because I think the Sixers' issues go beyond him, right? I think Joel Embiid's health is in question, and as the minutes are logging up, how much can he stay up? And I think, to the Hawks' credit, they got Clint Capella last year in a very under-the-radar trade. I think the headliner at the time from that trade was Robert Covington's going to Houston. What does this mean for Houston? But we're seeing, both in the Knicks series, now in the Philly series, Clint Capella is one of the maybe 5 best centers in the league, and makes a legitimate impact that few other centers in the league can do on a guy like Joel Embiid. So hats off to Travis Schlenk. It took a long time for his vision to come together, and I don't think he's hit a home run at every turn. But this team that they've put together, going into the year, I was actually somewhat low on them, because we've had examples in the past, most recently with Sacramento a few years back, where you add Zach Randolph to the team and Vince Carter to the team, and you just have Corey Joseph was another guy in that bunch. You just add a bunch of role players, and now you have 14 guys in your rotation that think they're getting minutes. And I thought that was what was going to happen to Atlanta. They've had some luck that injuries have naturally shaken out a normal rotation for them, but everyone seems to have bought in. At the deadline when they traded Rondo for Lou Williams, I kind of scratched my head at it because it seemed like Rondo offered a little bit more positional versatility for what they needed. But Lou Williams has really come through in both series so far.
He saved them in game 5. I mean, again, Trae with the 39, everybody chipping in. Lou, and we've seen this before. He's been around for a long time. Right. He has the ability to completely flip a game on its head. If you're down, that guy, when he is locked in, I mean, it turns into like street ball. It's like, it's sweet Lou. It's like there's nothing you can do. And he gives a lot of it back on the other end at times. He can go ice cold. But man, so many spots throughout his career has he just changed, like playoff games, just regular season games that I've witnessed as a Raptors fan. Prior here when he was with the Hawks, he played with the Sixers. Like, he's been around. He's done this his entire career, where it's like you look dead in the water, your team's struggling, and you just throw him in there and you just give him the keys and say, hey, you got 3 minutes here to maybe like get us back in this game. And that's sort of what he did there in game 5. I thought he completely turned it on its head, catching fire. And then suddenly it's like, oh, wow, we're back in this. We got a little life here. And credit to Nate McMillan for sticking with them. That's the other part. And he wasn't getting exposed on the other end because the Sixers couldn't score. I mean, Tobias Harris and Simmons was sort of like a no-show there, and Embiid was running out of gas. They couldn't exploit Lou Williams on that end. So yeah, that was fun to watch, and that's a huge part of the Hawks season here too, right? They started disappointingly. Big part of it was injuries, but then they made the decision to move on from Lloyd Pierce, who I absolutely love. We had him on the show. He's an incredible human. He's amazing here in the Atlanta community. And they made the tough decision, I would say, to I don't know. For whatever reason, he's not clicking with our star players, mainly Trae. So let's get a new voice in there. I don't know if it's whatever it was, like not seeing eye to eye, a respect thing, who was playing, who wasn't, whatever the system was. But Nate McMillan coming in right away and flipping that thing around, timed well with guys getting healthy, Bogdanovich and Gallinari, there is no doubt. But I almost think he almost deserved more Coach of the Year consideration. I don't think he should have won it, but I know he got some votes. What an incredible turnaround. And now to have him one game away, and even if you believe the Sixers still pull this out, they got a chance to go to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time since, I believe, 15 maybe was when they were last there. That's amazing. So, yeah, hats off to him.
Yeah, and I think, so Nate McMillan bounced around a bunch, right? Like, great run with Seattle, Ray Allen, Rashard Lewis. Went to Portland, had a weird roster construction there, and it was certainly a team that kind of got away from him a little bit. Reestablished himself with Indiana, and I think the confluence of how much better Atlanta has been since he took over, plus seeing what the Pacers have struggled with chemistry issues this year with Nate Bjorken, I think that really goes to show just how great a coach Nate McMillan is. But then on the other side with Philly, I think right now, and I've kind of had this sense ever since they let Jimmy go 2 years ago, where no matter how good Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris are, it still feels like they're just missing one guy. And Seth Curry was a masterful pickup. And there are nights where Seth Curry can be a guy you just hand the ball to. But at the end of a game, do you really want Shake Milton to be your guy, so to speak, creating offense? And I think for them, that's where they have to go to the drawing board this offseason if things don't kind of settle more naturally in the next week or in the next few days.
Well, yeah, if the Sixers do not beat the Hawks here, the Hawks, as we just talked them up, good team, but they're not a juggernaut.
Right.
I mean, the Sixers should beat them. Like, everyone basically healthy, they should beat them. They're a better team, or at least they appear to be, at least on paper, with stars and obviously the money that a lot of these guys make in Tobias and Ben and Embiid. You probably have to look to trade Ben Simmons. I don't see how you couldn't. He would have still, I think there would be a lot of interest in him still. You're probably getting back the best package or best other sort of star player that maybe works better with Embiid. I just don't see how you could do it again. I mean, what are we at? It's year 4 at least with them playing, I think, and coming up short. I think you've had your chance, and because of his limitations and maybe pairing with Embiid, it's not going to win you a title, and that's what Daryl Morey and the Sixers want to do. I think I would be amazed if they were to lose this series, and maybe even if they don't, that he isn't not like legitimately tried to be moved or I guess maybe acquire like a Kyle Lowry somehow or stuff like that, to right the ship. Maybe that's another option, but it's weird because Ben's got to be your point guard.
Right.
Because he's not a shooter.
Right.
So, you get into this weird little dilemma with him. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, there's a world in which he could be your Draymond Green, like your center, but I don't think he exists in a world with Joel Embiid on a team unless the other three guys are like the Curry brothers or Duncan Robinson or just elite sharpshooters. But shifting gears slightly here, we talked about Trae Young a bit. And I look at Trae Young and Devin Booker at very similar stages in their career where for years they've been perceived to be good stats, bad team guys. And they're turning that narrative around. And surely it's not just them. They're on significantly better teams than they've had in the past. Which player has kind of, in your opinion, done more for their reputation and their legacy in this playoffs? And then we'll kind of start talking about the West after that.
So it's just sticking with the Eastern Conference in terms of, I think people are excited to see if Trae Young could do stuff he did in college in playoff series. And there was probably a lot of, I don't know really why, if you watch them in the regular season, but doubters. You immediately go, he's too small.
Right.
And it's not going to work in the playoffs. They're going to put a bigger guy on him. They're going to take him out of his game. And even though the Sixers took, a good half of game one to figure out that Danny Green was not going to be the one to slow or contain a Trae Young. And maybe it should be our runner-up defensive player of the year in Ben Simmons. And then the other awesome defender that's made an all defensive team despite playing 20 minutes a game in Thibault. It should be those guys on him. I just love what's impressed me is that he's figuring out ways to get his team the victory without having to score 40 or 45. It is still getting into the paint and kicking out. He has had some incredible assists here in this series alone, let alone the one against the Knicks, where he is wrapping dimes around what feels like three defenders out to guys in the corner, and they're coming through it a lot of the time. There was one specifically that he hit to John Collins where it was like, whoa, how did he get that there? So he's just impressed. We knew he could score. We know he can hit the Curry-like bombs. We know he's got the floater. And I know his assist numbers have been there, so it's like, why is it a surprise? It's just like sometimes you just have to figure out a way to sort of control the game as the point guard, no doubt. And he's impressed me in his first go of it in the playoffs. I don't think anyone would be upset if he had struggled, right? In Madison Square Garden of all places, it's like, oh wow, what a tough first place to go at it, and a great defensive team there in New York. And he's done the opposite. He embraced the villain role, hit big shots. And has these guys, all of them, it feels like, believing in their run here that they're this fifth seed Hawks team is doing. So I'll go with him just because he's even shocked me a little bit, and I get to see him a lot here in Atlanta.
Yeah, I remember coming out of the draft, he was obviously getting a ton of comparisons to Steph. And then he went out of his way to say, I idolized Steve Nash growing up. Steve Nash is my guy. And you can see that with the passing. You can see that with the court vision. I think the biggest thing for him as the point guard, as the guy that his usage was over 30% last year, it took his teammates buying in, and we're starting to see that now. They believe that Trae Young is a superstar, which, the numbers back up. He didn't make the All-Star team this year, so I think that was a chip on their shoulder for all of them, and I would be surprised if Trae Young misses another All-Star game for maybe the next decade.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent in this league. So, just like we saw with the all NBA teams too, it's like, whoa, that guy didn't make it. That guy didn't make it, and you're like, yeah, but who are you taking off? And there are some people that would be like, well, Tatum's got to be on there. And that got into a weird voting thing. And other people saying, how is Donovan Mitchell not on here? He's on the best team in the league. He's the best player. You're right. Anybody that says that, but you're like, okay, well, who are you? So who are you taking off? That means you're taking off Kyrie. Right. It means you're taking off a Beal. It's like, okay, sure, you can make the case, but the league's in a good spot when it comes to just especially young talent. I'm with you, though. Feels like Trae is going to be making, outside of injury, a good 8, 9, 10 straight All-Star teams here. I don't see how he wouldn't. And he's become, I think what's been cool here in the playoffs, again, I'm sort of in Atlanta, so I'm seeing a lot of Trae Young, and I'm reading a lot about Trae Young and all that. You get the casual fan does start to come in around the playoffs. They start watching a lot more, which is great. And you're like, I assume there's a lot of people going, whoa, who is this? Who's this Trae Young guy? That's pretty amazing what he's doing. He's shushing the MSG crowd. He's hitting little game-winning floaters and setting up guys. So I feel like his popularity is sort of increased here. Again, a part of it, embracing the villain role a little bit, though he seems to be like the kindest villain I've ever seen. Like he's still a great kid. But just having the knack for the big moments, that gets people buzzing. And I think he's probably gained a lot of fans here, I would say, in these last 2 series. And that always trickles over into all-star votes and stuff like that, usually at least.
Yeah, Atlanta for years, obviously very good teams, but I don't think there's been a guy in Atlanta since Dominique Wilkins that has quite the star power that Trae Young brings to the table. And I know firsthand when they made the decision to trade the pick that turned into Luka Doncic on draft night, they made that decision with 2 things in mind. Number 1, will Trae Young help sell tickets?
Yep.
Number 2, will star players want to play with Trae Young? And maybe they had blinders on and said, okay, those things apply to Trae, but not Luka. And that was maybe a miscalculation on their end. Mm-hmm. But it is clear that they were nail on the head scouting Trae Young out of Oklahoma. A lot of people were saying this guy's going to be a bust. They got it right. He clearly is going to be a player that guys want to play with for years to come, and just changes the trajectory of what an Atlanta team can be long term.
Yeah. Do you think already we can almost stop the Mavericks-Hawks draft day trade of, the Luka and Trae and then another pick? Like, we can almost just leave it now, because it feels like both organizations are probably pretty happy with the talent they have, the stars they have, the teams they're building. I know what's going on in the Mavericks front office is a whole different thing, but it's a good trade for both. Right?
Skeets. I agree, but I can also say with certainty, knowing NBA fans, we need the other shoe to drop with Cam Reddish. Whether he gets an extension in Atlanta or he moves on elsewhere, until we know exactly what Cam Reddish's outcome is with the Hawks, there's going to be this comp. And I think, if you were going to ask me, I would say I'd rather have Luka, but I think it's way closer than it was at the start of the year.
Yep.
And I think that you can certainly win a championship with either of those guys as your either best player or second best, 1A, 1B.
Yeah.
We'll see. Neither of those guys, as we're seeing, there's no one in the NBA, be it LeBron, be it KD. There's no one in the NBA that can take a team single-handedly to the finals. But these guys are 2 of, I'd say, top 18 guys in the league. Luka's probably top 10, and Trae, I'd comfortably put in the top 20, but don't know where exactly he fits these days.
Right. When you start considering their age, it's even more impressive. That's mighty of you to say too, as a Knicks fan, after he did what he did to you guys. I'm sure you've been asked about this before, but were you getting any flashbacks to the Reggie days and a villain taking on that role and quieting your team and stuff like that? Or was that a stretch? Was that a narrative that we just started running with, which was like, come on, he's not really doing Reggie-like things? What do you think as a Knicks fan?
That was absolutely a New York self-importance narrative that we were driving. Our Knicks team was never as good as our 90s Knicks team. Like this year's Knicks team, we were happy to be there. I'll say it now. Like at the time, I was like, no, this is all gravy. And I'll say it now that I was surprised we got home court advantage. I thought we were going to beat the Hawks. I think what Trae did really showed us how far we still have to go as an organization. And I think part of that was I just thought we were going to figure out a way to get Julius Randle into pick and roll ISO onto Trae Young every possession. Right. And it didn't work out that way.
No.
And there is this pattern with Tibbs, and I'm still very bullish on what he's been able to do. And I think we have a really exciting offseason ahead, which we'll get to later in the program. But, there is a pattern from Chicago to Minnesota, immediate upgrades, just bringing discipline to the table, making accountability a primary pillar of your team. And then come 2-3 years later, we don't really have X's and O's for the playoffs that are going to give us a leg up on our opponent. And I do have some apprehension about kind of us patting ourselves on the back too hard going into next season, not upgrading our team significantly and thinking we're going to get the same results, because next year we're not going to catch anyone by surprise.
Right.
We now have a target on our back as one of the good teams in the league. If you looked at the Vegas odds going into the year, I think the Knicks had the second or third lowest wins projection.
I mean, what was it at? Like in the low 20s?
21. Yeah, 21.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of optimism. I think the Leon Rose era in New York will be interesting. Obviously, really good connections with some superstar players around the league. And there are guys that, without saying too much, I think like the realistic outcome or a kind of 60th percentile outcome that I'd be happy with is bringing in a guy like DeMar DeRozan, I know near and dear to your heart.
Yeah.
And maybe a really good role play, be it Josh Hart, be it Duncan Robinson, be it like, one of these guys that just, maybe gets a $70, $80 million deal, but just brings a lot to the table, be it a shooter or just a tough-nosed defender. So I'm optimistic. My dream scenario, which, is recalibrating by the day as Kawhi Leonard's injury kind of news comes out, would be, in an ideal world, we are able to lure a superstar like Kawhi in free agency and then sell the farm to get a guy like Dame Lillard in a trade, be it RJ and Randall and picks. Like, I don't know, but that's like, if you're playing fantasy basketball,
sure,
that's kind of where you're at. But no, realistically, I think we're going to add a really good player and a really good role player, and we're going to run it back next year with quickly taking a leap, RJ taking a leap, and then Julius Randle, who I'm most concerned about just because contract years are scary for some of these guys, and he has a big chip on his shoulder to prove this year was not a fluke, but we'll see. Well,
didn't you see the big breaking news today that Zion Williamson is going to be coming to the New York Knicks? I'm just kidding, of course, but the friction, the reports, not happy maybe with the Pelicans at all times. It's so funny. As soon as that happens, you start seeing Zion in Knicks jerseys photoshops on Twitter. It moves quick. Because he loves RJ Barrett, as we all know.
Yeah, there's also so from my perspective on that whole scenario, the short-term opportunistic Knick fan wonders, maybe we trade RJ for Brandon Ingram, whose stock is at an all-time low. The Pelicans get a guy that Zion's going to be happy about, and the Knicks get a guy that I think has real upside to be a top 20 player in Ingram, something that I don't quite see from RJ, though I'm very encouraged.
No, that's interesting. You would in picking the two, you would want to run with Ingram. I'm not saying you're wrong, or what I think, but RJ, at times has looked really good. No, I'm Canadian, so I'm biased here too. I mean, he's super young. That's fascinating. I hadn't thought about it going the other way. Wow.
I think that when we're talking about all of these players, be it Julius Randle, be it RJ Barrett, be it Brandon Ingram, there is a little bit of I think RJ's better as a complementary guy to a guy like Randle, whereas I think Ingram has proven he's at his best when he gets to be the primary ball handler on the team. So I don't know if it's a perfect fit. If we were to bring in Ingram, we would presumably have to figure out what that means for Julius, because I don't think those guys are a great pair. But there was some of that I was doing a little thinking on. The other layer to it was JJ Redick, of course, earlier in the season, got traded to Dallas and was very outspoken about his disappointment about the trade, essentially called David Griffin, president of basketball operations of the Pelicans, a liar. I'm going to filibuster for Skeets to get back in here. But chat, essentially, JJ Redick wanted to be bought out, was told he'd be bought out or get traded to a Northeastern team. And what happened was he ended up getting traded to the Mavericks, which, playoff contender, but he was not thrilled about being farther away from his family. And he actually went on his own podcast and voiced his displeasure. JJ Redick, of course, shares the same agency as Zion Williamson. And he essentially said, I don't see how any of my agents would ever trust David Griffin in this regime again. So I think there is just some friction as fallout of the JJ Redick trade. We'll see. Obviously, Zion is under contract for 2 more seasons before he becomes a restricted free agent. We have not yet seen the player actually accept his qualifying offer rather than going with the restricted free agency route of getting a max deal that's putting you on the hook for another 5 years. We will see. Zion's the type of guy who, as impressive as he is, as kind of awe-inspiring as he is as a player, just a lot of apprehension from me as a Knicks fan, knowing our history of getting guys just a year or two too late, from Stephon Marbury to Steve Francis to Tracy McGrady. Like, Zion's a guy that he's had injury history in the past. He's a huge guy. You know, the knees only have a certain amount of shelf life. So if the Knicks were ever going to make an all-out push for Zion, I would say do it now and try to figure out the way to build the team around him down the road, because you wait for free agency, be it 3 years, be it 5 years, be it 8 years from now, it might be too late.
Yeah. To go back to what's happening with the Mavericks and Rick Carlisle moving on, I saw Mike Vorkunov tweet, the amount of like coaching turnover in the NBA over the last 2 seasons is like wild. It's 17 of the 30 coaches who started the 1920 regular season as head coach are no longer with that franchise, which is pretty mind-boggling number. We have 7 coaching vacancies right now, Jacob.
Yeah.
Celtics, because Brad Stevens, moving into the front office role. Got the Pacers. We got the Orlando Magic. We got the Wizards. Got the Blazers. Got the Pelicans, one of these teams. And then we have the Mavericks after today's news. It's tough with 7 to start going, well, I've got this one at 4 and this one at 5. But if you were I guess the best way to ask this is which of those 7 is the most enticing? If you were an available head coach and you're looking at the landscape and you see these 7 teams as they're currently constructed, as we head into the offseason, which one are you like, ooh, hey, agent, get on the horn with them. That's the one I really want. Which one would you pick and why? Because I think it's an interesting thought experiment.
Super interesting thought experiment. I've done a little thinking here, and I'll caveat my answer by breaking down my coaching profile into 2 different categories. There's they're the Mike D'Antonis of the world who have nothing left to prove. They're going to be Hall of Famers one day, and they've done it for years. And they're probably on their last stop. Wherever they go next will be their last stop. So for a guy like that, going to Portland, going to Dallas, that makes a lot of sense, right? Mm-hmm. Just you can impose your creativity on that offense seemingly overnight. Then there's more of, I'll just cherry pick a name, like the Nick Nurse type, right? Like unestablished newcomer trying to make a name for themselves. And we've seen a lot of success from that type of coach in recent years, from Taylor Jenkins in Memphis, obviously Nick Nurse. So I would say the most appealing team in my eyes right now is the Pelicans, if they're able to reestablish the culture of who they are, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason I say the Pelicans is I think they have a ton of picks fresh out of the Drew Holiday trade. So they have a ton of equity to work with to build the perfect team. And I think they just have a ton of low-hanging fruit. Having Steven Adams on the roster precludes you from putting Zion at the 5, but that would be my first order of business. If I'm the Pelicans, I'm running small ball. Zion's my 5. I'm going to try to figure out a way to complement him with 3-and-D big man, be it, those unicorn types. And speaking of a unicorn type, there's a guy in Dallas, Kristaps Porzingis, whose trade value has never been lower. Mm-hmm. Jaren Jackson in Memphis has trade, he's coming off of a big injury, and now seeing how crowded the front court is for Memphis, he might be another guy. I think there are plenty of guys around the league that you can pair with Zion and make it work. They just have not done a great job there. So if I'm a coach, that's probably where I would look to first. But how about yourself?
Well, that's an interesting pick. I mean, you got Zion. That the part of this equation is do I have a generational superstar that we can hopefully build around? So you look at Dallas with Luka, and you look at the Pelicans with Zion, and then I think you look at the Blazers with currently a star guy finishing top 5 MVP votes in the Blazers, and then the Celtics with 2 potential. I mean, already an all-star, or 2 all-stars, I should say, in Tatum and Brown. So that just in pure talent. But then you do the whole thing where it's well, I want some stability here. I mean, I don't want expectations to be too high. That could be a concern. I mean, a lot of those teams I just mentioned, maybe not the Pelicans, but I would expect the Celtics, the Blazers for sure, even the Mavs. That's come in here, fix what's broken, and start winning some playoff series basically now, because we think, again, there would be changes, but we have the talent. We've got superstars, complementary players, make it work. And like, whoa, like you don't have a lot of time. And maybe that's good because you're like, okay, I'd rather have more talent than not and try and win games. But there's a lot of pressure there. So that's where they get a little dicey for me. The Pacers, I will say, I know it's not a sexy market, but they had a lot of injuries and they have a lot of good guys.
Yeah.
And I don't think their expectations are like through the roof. It's not like, get me to the promised land right away. It's get in the playoffs, which they usually are, and, put up a good fight and maybe win a round or two and start building that way. But all those injuries with trades too, and Karis LeVert coming in there and Brogdon was injured and Sabonis was injured and Turner was injured and TJ Warren was I mean, it goes on and on and on. That's an interesting job to me. Because I like a lot of their guys. And again, when you pair it with the expectations being probably reasonable, well, you're probably going to have that job maybe for a couple of years, though they just literally hired a coach and he was gone after 1 year. So who knows? I guess it could go wrong, but it feels like they wouldn't do that right away again.
Yeah, I would really love to see Terry Stotts end up in Indy. Steve Clifford is another name that could make sense there. I think what they had in Nate McMillan was an established veteran coach that was defensive minded. And with Bjorken, they really tried to hit a home run, right? They got a guy off of Nick Nurse's staff in hopes that he was the next Nick Nurse. Mm-hmm. But I think, to your point, that team is just full of good chemistry guys, and they need a guy that is player first, can communicate and speak the language of the players. So for me, I totally agree with you. And another layer to the Pacers that I think makes them an attractive or enticing spot is I think for the past 3 years or so, there's been this kind of tacit understanding among NBA fans that Sabonis and Turner probably doesn't make sense long term, and one of them should get traded. I don't know which one it is. If you were to ask me, I would say maybe keep Turner, trade Sabonis, just because Sabonis might have a little more trade value. But I think it's time for one of those guys to maybe become a trade asset. And then to your point, like between Brogdon, Karis LeVert, TJ Warren, just a ton of talent. I think the issue with the Pacers, and we've seen it for years, so no breaking news here. They've got an owner that doesn't love to spend money, right? Yeah. So, and Simon Malls, of course, Herb Simon, like not the best business to be in during the pandemic. So like, we'll see what that looks like. I definitely agree with you. As far as expectations go, there's an opportunity there. Similarly, I think Orlando has a pretty low expectation, high ceiling situation. Jonathan Isaac, their best player, coming back from a season-long injury. Markelle Fultz should be ready for the start of the season. They'll have good draft picks. Cole Anthony, Chuma Okeke looked like very solid rookie. Like that team has depth. It has a lot of future assets coming out of the Vucevic trade. Like, I think they were just kind of, and we saw this with Masai in Toronto and Jeff Weltman, of course, disciple of Masai, and just taking the same premise to Orlando of no rush. We don't need to make our move in the year one.
Right.
They made their move this year with Vooch. They traded him. They got 2 first rounders. We'll see what they do. But, for me, Orlando, no income tax if you're a player, if you're going down to Florida. We'll see if that has anything in free agency. We do know they have had success with free agents in the past, not consistently, but from Rashard Lewis to, obviously Grant Hill, T-Mac, they had a chance at a big 3 with Tim Duncan that fell through because Doc Rivers wouldn't let his family on the team plane. That's a wild story.
It's a crazy story. Yeah, no, they're good. They're good. They need to hit either in the draft or it's probably going to be through the draft, if we're being honest. I doubt, as great as I'm sure paying no taxes would be in Florida, that they're not going to get a big name. And there's not that many big names in this year's free agency class. Anyway, they need more than probably any team in the league, it feels like, to nail like a superstar in the draft. Like a guy like in the first or 2 years, second year, you can be like, that's our guy. And now let's figure out how to build around it. Because despite all these like really young, promising players, it's still, who's the guy? We need a star. We need a building block, like a legit foundation to then put these other pieces around. So, yeah, I guess, look, there's only 30 jobs. You're not going to be too picky when it comes to an NBA head coaching job. I'm sure most of them will take any of them and believe that they can turn them around or get them to the next level or start, building from the foundation up. So,
You make a good point there. Like, they have had a few singles in the draft and a few strikeouts. They have not hit that home run.
No.
I do wonder if they could take a similar path to what the Knicks did with Julius Randle. Just make a bet on an up and coming guy, be it Randle himself after next season, or like obviously Jeff Weltman has a connection with DeMar DeRozan, who's a free agent. Like, that could be interesting. Like, just take a 2-year overpay, but just have a guy on your team that can be your go-to scorer. Cole Anthony, I hope you're not listening. I know you want to be that go-to scorer. I'd be interested to see, right? There's a lot of, I need to do my kind of deep dive of the free agent class a little bit more in depth, but I think there's potential there. And as I mentioned, tons of picks if they do want to make a trade somewhere.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. I think it's not to Randall's level, but they were almost doing that with the Vucevic trade with Wendell Carter Jr., right? It was like, well, it's not working out all that well in Chicago. He gets lost a little bit in the shuffle. He can't stay healthy was a big part too. And again, I don't think Carter Jr. is going to blossom into a 10-time All-Star, but he could be a really solid piece. And I think they saw that and said, well, Vooch is not going to be the answer here. I mean, he's good. He gets the numbers. He's an all-star. But it doesn't really, with what we have and the talent, like the young talent we have around him, especially the positions and all that, let's move on from that. And let's try and get something. Let's try and sort of hit not even a home run. Let's hit a double with one of these guys that we get back. So it's the right move. And you would think there more than all these other spots, so a lot of these other teams we're naming, like, you're going to have a long runway, I would think, to get that plane off the ground. I would expect you'll get, and they'll go with a coach. I don't know who it will be. Will it be a Kenny Atkinson type? Somewhat, could it be like a Lloyd Pierce type, like something like that, where it's like they connect with these young guys and you got 2 or 3 years to build sort of a squad. Whereas some of these other ones, there are like, you got to come in and I think deliver in a first year or two and connect with the stars that you have and start winning playoff series right away, be it in Dallas or Portland or maybe even the Wizards. They're always like, no, we want to be in the playoffs and winning series. Like, we got the guys, we should be able to do that. And those would be dangerous, like Washington and Portland. If you come in, things don't turn around right from the jump, then sure enough, what are you going to hear? Oh, Dame wants out possibly. Beal wants out possibly. It's like what happened in Houston could happen in those situations. It's not that far-fetched. I know Lillard's a loyal guy. Beal keeps saying the same thing, like, I want to do this in Washington. But this. Like, we've seen this before, where the new coach comes in, and if it doesn't go well quickly, then it's like that star player's like, well, I don't want to be here now either. So some pressure there, whoever comes into those situations.
So let's go down that lane for a second. I think you hit the nail on the head. Those are the two names that stand out as superstars that might get traded. And not saying they will. Maybe. Yeah. And, with every superstar, how many years did it take for like Drew Holiday to get traded, right? Like, he was in rumors for years. We don't know. I think the treadmill is starting on those guys, maybe. If you're the Sixers, you have Ben Simmons. We talked about how that fit, might not be perfect. If you're the Sixers, do you go all in for one of those two? Do you put Ben Simmons, Matisse Thybulle, Tyrese Maxey, and let's say 2 first-rounders, 3 first-rounders on the table? Notably, they had the chance at Harden and they didn't go that route.
Yeah.
Do you think they kind of learn from that and go all in, or do you think they maybe go more in the direction of what the Rockets did with Harden, where they trade Simmons for 3 or 4 kind of quarters on the dollar rather than $1?
I would expect them to do the first option. I sort of would think they would really do an aggressive shakeup in terms of moving, let's say, a Simmons for, another star you're hoping for, a guy that can score, a guy that we've watched this enough where Embiid can carry this team for 2-3 quarters and then starts to run out of gas. I mean, he's a giant of a guy. It's going to happen. He can't carry them, I don't think, for the most part on both ends too, because he asks a lot of them on defense for 45 minutes of a playoff game. I just don't think he's ever going to get to that. I actually think you're asking too much at that point. So you need either what you have there in Tobias Harris and Ben Simmons to step up, and they have in games, but they've shown that they can't really do it consistently. So you got to get that other star. like you're saying, like whoever it is, like a Beal or even a lower end, like a tier down star, like a McCollum or something like that. Right. You need a guy that can score, like can operate from the perimeter and attack and get you a bucket when it's crunch time. So it's not like their offense becomes so predictable because it's like, it's going to Embiid. So you can start to, like, as a defense, really lock in on that and where the double's going to come and who you're going to leave open and not worry about. And you're like, what they're going to do. And it's just in today's game that may have worked in the 90s. It did with a lot of those guys, but it's just different now. It's not as simple as just throw it into your big man. I think defenses have just got, a little too smart now when it comes to, like, leaving particular guys open, just straight up leaving guys to go double and triple big guys like that. So you need guys that are going to be on the perimeter that can score. So I think they would. I really think the Sixers with Morey at the helm would see what they could get. Like you said, the Harden one was there. If you believe the reports that it was possible, do they regret it? I think a lot of teams do regret not making a move for Kyle Lowry.
Yep.
If I'm being honest, I'm not just saying that because he's one of my favorite players. I think he could have been had. And they're like teams like the Lakers that could have used him. The Sixers, of course, could have used him. So, yeah, they'll do something. I just don't see Morey going, no, that's fine. We'll just do this again. I just don't see it. And I don't think you can.
Yeah, it's complicated, man. Because I think if you're Philly, Morey is not opposed to making big sweeping changes. We've seen that before. The three teams that, but at the same time, before I dive into the three teams that I think might make sense for a Ben Simmons trade, if I'm a GM around the league, I'm watching what's happening in Milwaukee right now, and that is hurting my excitement level about potentially acquiring Ben Simmons. Because I think it's fair to say that Ben Simmons is maybe 90% the guy that Giannis is, right? Like, they do things very similarly, but just not quite as elite at all the things that they both do very well. Mm-hmm. And you see, I think we're learning firsthand, and maybe we started learning it last year more, but Giannis is probably, in his ideal circumstance, closer to Kevin Garnett as a player than maybe LeBron. And for years, we wanted him to be LeBron. And we're learning maybe he's better as a pick and roll man. Mm-hmm. And with Simmons, I think it's a similar dynamic where, you're bringing him in, you need to accommodate your entire roster around him. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing that, you really need like a guy like Devin Booker almost, who's both an elite spot up guy, but also can be an elite kind of secondary ball handler. And that's just a tough guy to find.
Yeah.
So the three teams that kind of sort of make sense, and I'm not going to prognosticate on what the trade would be, just because I'll leave that to the smarter minds.
You're not going to fire up the trade machine? Oh, my goodness.
I think Cleveland makes a little bit of sense because between Garland and Sexton, there's a little bit of redundancy there. And I think if you are Philly, one of those guys makes a lot of sense for what you're trying to do. And I think, meanwhile, if you're Cleveland, if you can maybe pair one of those guys with Larry Nance and a few first rounders, maybe there's a deal to be had there.
Okay.
Obviously, Washington is coming up a lot. The big headline move would be a Simmons for Beal type trade, right?
Yeah.
And then last but not least, I'm going to throw a little bit of a wild card out there. San Antonio. San Antonio has a ton of depth. They have a ton of guys that, to your point, Daryl Morey's probably not as interested in quarters on the dollar, but like, if you're telling me as a Sixers fan was told today, you can get Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell and Derek White all coming back, like, that's interesting. And I can see San Antonio being interested in kind of getting a star to build around and work that way. So those are the three that make sense to me. Obviously, Portland's the other kind of elephant in the room, but I have no idea where they're going this offseason. It's a weird situation to be in.
Oh, it's very weird. And I really do believe Lillard when he says, like, I want to be here. I want to bring a title back to this city. It's been so long. I truly do. And I don't know, maybe I'm a fool for believing that because, it feels like almost every player, especially in today's day and age, they eventually move on. It's just like time runs out and they want to win a championship because it's all about the rings culture. And it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to do it here. So I've got to like demand a trade or demand an out and stuff like that. And we don't even really, and nor should we like hold it against players. You're like,
right.
The whole point is to win a title in any of these sports. And you don't believe your best, chances in this particular place where you've been and put in a lot of sweat equity and all that, then move on and try and find it. But something just tells me he's one of the rare exceptions and that he will be there. But again, I guess if a new coach comes in there and can't get that team to play defense, like that's the thing. They can score. They just need to slow the other team down. Simmons is a fascinating pairing with a guy like Lillard. Like I love it. I don't see how many people wouldn't. Simmons as your guard with a guy that can score 30 a game that maybe is a little limited defensively just makes sense.
Right.
So yeah. And I even love the concept of a guy like McCollum in Philly. That's exactly the type of player they need. When prior to his injury this year, that guy was like a 25 point per game scorer. He's doing this on a team with Dame Lillard. Like he can get his, and he hits clutch shots too. He's come up time and time again in Portland. So be a fascinating trade. You could see it working for both. I could, you'd have to get into the details and make the money work and all that, but it would be a fun shakeup of Ben Simmons in Portland and McCollum in Sixers, where it could benefit both teams. It could.
Lehigh kid as well. So CJ, no stranger to Pennsylvania.
Yep.
I think if you were going to make that trade, obviously Portland would have to give a little more maybe. So maybe it's Robert Covington, right? That's the guy that started his career or kind of came onto the scene, if you will, with Philly. Obviously, Daryl Morey has an appreciation for his game because he worked tirelessly to acquire him for a second time in Houston. So there could be some interesting stuff there. I think when push comes to shove, though, Philly just needs, to your point, like whoever it is, be it Sexton, be it McCollum, be it Beal, be it Will, they just need a guy that, you don't have to lean on Joel. We've done a lot of Eastern Conference talk. I'd love to kind of shift gears to the Western Conference. And obviously, Clippers stunned everyone last night. Paul George, playoff P, showing up. And maybe we're learning, similar to what we were talking about earlier with Brandon Ingram, Julius Randle, maybe Paul George, as much as he wants to say that he can complement anyone, maybe he is best off as the primary go-to guy on a team. We saw that in Indiana, at least.
Yeah, it's always with playoff P, with Paul George. It just comes down to consistency. And that's like the fact of the matter is that's what separates the really good players, even great players, from the superstars, right? It's like, yeah, you can do this for a game or two. And Paul's on a nice run right now. Don't get me wrong. Like, this is awesome. Like, he's scoring 30 plus here over the last couple of games. But can you do it time in and time out? Like every night for the most part. That's the superstar level. That's the LeBrons. And when Kawhi's playing, I mean, that's the Kawhis and KDs and of the world. I don't think Paul will ever be that. And that's fine because he's still an all-NBA guy. He set the record, did you see, for most all-NBA third-team selections in NBA history, which is like so perfect for Paul George. It's like scary. It's like, yeah, he's really good. He's one of the top guys at his position, but he's never really the best. It's so good that we want to call him PG third team now instead of PG 13 because it just rolls off the tongue. But what he did last night, we were talking about it on today's No Dunks podcast. I think it's the best playoff game he's ever played. Mm-hmm. I think there's only a handful of other ones, most of them in Indiana, like you said, when he was the guy back in 2014. There was one against the Wizards where he had a massive 39-12 game. And then he had that game against LeBron in the Eastern Conference Finals, game 5. He scored 37 against them. He actually had a great game in the Norman Powell game for Raptors fans back in 2016 in that series where Norm really flipped that game around, but he had a 39-8 game PG did. Best game he's ever played. Like last night, from a narrative standpoint, number standpoint, bringing it in every quarter of that game, even when the Jazz were like splashing threes early on. At the end of the second quarter, I thought Utah had a chance to run away with the game. They blew it a little bit on turnovers and missed shots. And Paul George, there was like a nice 3-minute stretch there at the end of the second quarter. He just kept them in it. He just like was attacking, putting pressure on them. He missed like a bunny inside, but got the rebound, then got it again, like Moses Malone type. And then he was sort of flexing. He just like chipped away and kept it close enough there where it was a 5-point deficit despite the Jazz hitting 17 threes. He was awesome. And he got help. Morris was great.
Mhm.
Reggie Jackson was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. He hit 2 huge shots. I enjoy cheering for Paul George. Yeah. I know that's a rare, weird thing to say, especially on the internet, but I'm actually actively like cheering him on, especially without Kawhi. Like, I'd like to see him have like another massive game here in Game 6 at home, or if it were to come in Game 7. Like, I don't really know why. I know why. He's come up short. He gives himself nicknames. He sometimes puts his foot in his mouth. You can pile on guys like that, but he's a damn good player. So it was exciting to see him do that last night.
Yeah, future Hall of Famer. You can look at the accolades and Matt will support it. I was trying to think of who, before you mentioned PG third team, who like in my head is the consummate third team All-NBA guy. And I haven't looked it up, and I have no idea if third team All-NBA was even a thing in the 90s. But Mitch Richmond is the guy that comes to mind as like a consummate third team NBA guy. I have a question for you, because we got into a big debate on our podcast on No Dunks. And this is for everybody in the stream team here still with us too. It's when you are debating with friends online, texting, at the bar, in the barbershop, and you're talking about the greatest players ever and rankings and even trading this guy for this guy and Hall of Fame credentials and all that. When you bring up all NBA selections, do you ever, or anyone you know, do they ever go, yeah, he was 10-time All-NBA, but how many first teams did he make? How many of those were third teams? How many were second teams? What's your answer to that? Do you ever actually break down the All-NBA like team selections, or is it like an all-encompassing, well, Dirk was a 12-time All-NBA player and you don't care like how many were first, second, or third? What's your answer to that? Great question. I think when we're talking about a guy like Dirk or even Paul George, probably don't get into the nitty-gritty of first or second team. I think if you're talking, I can't say never, but for Paul George,
saying never. I have never had that argument with anyone in my life of like, well, yeah, that's a lot of LNBAs, but let's take a look. How many were first team? I don't think anyone does that, but you were about to say, I guess there are some instances. Yeah.
The few and far between instances are like comparing and contrasting Steph Curry and Chris Paul's careers and just looking in the nitty gritty of like best point guard of the last 20 years or so, right? Like those types of dynamics, I think first team versus second team does tell a big narrative. And I think that's somewhere, you know, as time goes on, we'll gain a bigger appreciation for what James Harden has done this decade, what Russell Westbrook's done this decade. But no, it is few and far between. And I think like it really comes down to guys that are going to be top 20, 25 players of all time rather than, you know, top 20 players right now type dynamic.
Yeah, the guys on the show, because we got into a disagreement, like I said, and I'm adamant that I've never had that argument. I just never had it. But someone brought up the point, I think it was Trae, that maybe when a guy is like borderline Hall of Fame and we're like debating like, should he be in, should he not? That's when it comes up. That's when people fire up the Basketball Reference page and goes, oh, Mitch Richmond, you know, okay, like you brought him up, you know, he's in the Hall of Fame. It's like, well, how many like first teams did he make? Again, I just think the accolade is you were one of the best players at your position, because we still have positions with these, right? And it'll be interesting to see if they go away from that. But it's like, you know, you're basically saying, well, you were a top 3 center that year, or you were a top 6 guy at the guard or forward position. That's awesome. You know, you were elite that year in the eyes of the voters at the very least. I just think it's fascinating, but it is great to like circle back to Paul George. It's just so perfect that he is like, he's made a lot of All-NBA third teams. He has an All-NBA first team selection too. Like we were looking it up, but he now has the record, and I'm trying to find somewhere in my notes here, and maybe I'll take a second to find it. But I did have the rest of the list, like who he was tied with for All NBA third selection. So I'll try and find that.
Yeah, I wonder, like 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when their careers are over, I feel like Paul George and Jimmy Butler have been like, they were both in trade rumors for years. They both played in the Central Division together. I wonder who legacy or who NBA fans will remember more fondly as like a star player, because very, very similar in a lot of ways, very different in terms of their approach and their reputation. Both have obviously had massively successful careers, though coming from very different kind of backgrounds and pedigrees.
No, it's a good one. I mean, it's, recency bias always comes into play with these things. That's a fascinating one. I can't find it in my notes too, by the way, who he was tied with, but it was like 3 or 4 people that had, I think it's like 4 selections, and now he's up to 5. It's amazing. So you think he is a Hall of Fame first ballot, Paul George? Like, let's say his career ended, I don't know, this year. It's over.
Yeah, I would have to look at the numbers. I think he's 100% on track. I looked at the Basketball Reference like projections, and they're just looking at stats. I think he right now has top 30 all time in points and top 35 or 40 in rebound. Like, the guy's just put up so many numbers across the board, and not to mention how many all defensive first and second teams he's made, and not to mention he's had playoff success with Indiana. He made 2 conference finals. I think when all is said and done, he's going to be a Hall of Famer first ballot. Though I would have said the same thing about Chris Bosh, and that didn't come to fruition as a first ballot. So who knows?
Yeah. We'll see. Seeing somebody in the stream. This is actually a good idea for like a showcase on Top Shot, like an all NBA sort of thing, where you have to make a showcase, of all NBA third guys or stuff like that. There's something there with the all NBA teams. That's a good call there. Jackson Torres, 79 there in the stream team.
So Skeets, let's talk about obviously the Utah Jazz in a hole, 3-2 Clippers. We're playing in Staples Center.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this series ends in 6? Do you think it goes 7? And give me your pick on who you think comes out.
I will say the Clippers win in 6. I will. And a big part of it, and it sucks. I mean, it sucked with a lot of teams in the playoffs, unfortunately, is Donovan Mitchell's banged up, and he did not look good in Game 5. And there's no Mike Conley. And I don't know what his status as of, jumping on here with you right now. I don't know if he's a go in Game 6. I'm guessing not. And even if he is, he's probably going to be a little hampered. That's tough. I also I was just shocked again that they hit 17 threes and they were not up big. That was not, if you were watching that game last night, was it last night? Yeah, it was last night. My goodness. It's all blending and blurring together. That it's like, whoa, I can't imagine you're going to hit 17 threes in the second half, Jazz. That's going to be rough. But Bojan Bogdanovic can't miss. He's suddenly Klay Thompson. And, sure enough, they went cold. I've been impressed with the Clips here, even without Kawhi. And if Paul George can string together another 30 sort of 12-8 type of game, and then Marcus Morris hits threes and Reggie Jackson, who I will definitely admit I did not have a lot of faith in. I brought up Dennis Schroeder comparisons where it's guys that they're very confident. They're overly confident at times in their abilities and they want to get paid and think they're star players and they should get all these minutes and stuff like that. And you're like, man, I don't know. Maybe you're better suited in a backup role. And at times in both of their careers, they've proven me wrong. And I think other times I've looked right. Maybe not. But Reggie Jackson right now, goggles and all, headband and all, he's wearing every possible accessory you can wear as a basketball player. He's coming through. He a couple times in Game 5, he went at Rudy Gobert. Took him at the rim. Had a beautiful up and under, hit some big shots. So Terrence Mann has given them something. I'll take the Clippers. I think actually Terrence Mann has been huge. He was great in Game 5. There was a section in the regular season where Kawhi was out. That happens. And Mann got starting minutes and really contributed. And that was probably a blessing in disguise, right, for the Clips at this point, because he looks comfortable with these guys. And they figured out something with going small and Batum's playing well. So I will take the Clippers. But again, I say that having made a lot of wrong predictions in these playoffs so far. Just when you think one team has control, it's like, oh, well, there goes that. So I'll take the Clips in 6, though.
Yeah, I think if you look at just the trends of the series, the injuries, Gobert has not looked elite. I think Utah was hoping he would in this type of a series. And, it'll be interesting. If they do proceed to the conference finals and let's say Chris Paul misses the first 2 games or so, I think we got a really interesting series there. I personally like Phoenix coming out of the West, regardless of what happens with Chris Paul. I mean, obviously, if Chris Paul misses the entire series, I'll have to recalibrate a bit. But I just really like what Monty Williams does. And for me, I don't want to deride too much on the Jalen Smith pick because, they've made so many other excellent picks over the years. But man, how interesting that team would look with Tyrese Halliburton or even Devin Vassell, Sadiq Bey, just so many good 3-and-D guys that they skipped over for a backup center that they don't play. I mean, so I'll be interested to see what that looks like. Do you agree? Do you think Phoenix is now the team to beat in the West?
I think that's right. Against either of these teams. The Clippers one is fascinating. Like, well, if Kawhi is not playing, then that is an unbelievable hill to climb.
Right.
If Kawhi is playing through the injury, and that's a big if, like if he came back, if they knock off the Jazz, they got to do that first in either 6 or 7, and then they're to play the Suns. And let's even say Chris Paul doesn't play a game. I actually think he will be there, sort of from the jump in that series. I don't think the Clips can do it without Kawhi, but if Kawhi played, I think I would pick them.
Yep.
It's tough. Once you have a guy like Kawhi on your team, to take it back to the Raptors and what happened in 2019, once you see it with your own eyes and see what he's capable of doing and like just the calmness he brings over your fandom, because you're like, it's all right. We're not out of it. We've got him. He's the Terminator. It's pretty special when you see it. And so it's tough for me to shake. And that doesn't mean that guy always remains that guy, but the guys that are on that level are pretty special in your LeBrons and Kawhis and KDs. So you always feel like we could win this game because we got the best guy out here. But that's a big, big, big what if with this health. So I'm hedging, no doubt. But if Kawhi doesn't play, I think the Suns, they should be the favorite in that series. And they probably would be with home court advantage and if Chris Paul's playing. Everybody's contributing. They're very similar if you think about it, like right now what the Hawks are doing. Everybody is chipping in. Campaign, Jay Crowder is on his classic, playoff tear. He's been great. DeAndre Ayton, you asked that question about like who surprised you the most, maybe who's really come about here in the playoffs for the East. And I went with Trae. It's DeAndre Ayton in the West, hands down with what he's doing and the competition he's had to play in some of these series. Yeah, I'll go Suns. And I don't think Kawhi, I really don't think he will play. I mean, his track record says they play it very, very safely when it comes to these injuries. So I'll go Suns. That should be a fun series, though, if they play the Jazz or the Clippers.
Yeah, it's really sad because I think what I saw the day after Kyrie got hurt, the Clippers played the next night, and that was the best I've ever seen them play. I felt like they saw their lane to the championship for the first time because I think whether any player wants to admit it, until very, very recently, everyone just kind of assumed Brooklyn was going to run away with it. Mm-hmm. And the Clippers, for a night, had everything clicking. And then next day, Kawhi, ACL.
Yeah.
Going into when it was 2-0 Dallas last round, I asked openly, where do we see Kawhi Leonard start next season? And I think the Clippers have done enough to get themselves the goodwill of Kawhi coming back. But that would be fascinating. Like just throwing some names out there, the Warriors might have a deal to make to get a guy like Kawhi. The Heat might have a deal to make to get a guy like Kawhi. As I mentioned before, the Knicks might have a deal to make to get a guy like Kawhi. Even the Lakers, right? Like they courted him pretty aggressively. I don't think he wants to be a third banana, but who knows? Mm-hmm. Do you think Kawhi stays? Do you think that's pretty much a lock?
100%.
Okay.
100%. I think he stays. I think he wanted to go to California. He wanted to be in Los Angeles. He got there. He's on a good team. There's been a coaching change. They might make the conference finals here. They might even, they could beat, if he plays, of course they could beat the Suns. It's pretty wide open. Yeah, I think he stays. I don't see Kawhi going anywhere. That's just what my gut says, but
would you
wrong before.
Would you be heartbroken knowing how special he was to the Raptors and how important? Would you be heartbroken if he came back? Like everyone in Toronto, from my understanding, was like, he said all along he wanted to be in LA. He wanted warm weather. He wanted to go home. Would your opinion of him change if you found out later this summer, oh, actually he's going to the Knicks. He doesn't care about Southern California as much as we may have thought.
No, I wouldn't care. I think it's extremely unlikely, but I wouldn't care. Today's the 2-year anniversary of the Raptors championship parade. So I've been basking in all the tweets and videos, YouTube clips of that they've been sharing of that pretty special day. No, I don't see that happening because I think he is staying there and he really wanted to get there and he left a great team and great organization to go there, and that's fine. Now, no ill will though. If he did he flipped and did a 180 and suddenly he's a New York Knick. I wouldn't like him in the Eastern Conference. Okay, I'll be honest, but no,
in your own division, no less.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I forgot we still have divisions. Are you the one person left on the earth that cares about NBA divisions?
Oh, for sure. I love divisions.
Yeah, what are you, a big Atlantic guy? Are you?
No better way to determine home court advantage nonsensically.
Yeah.
So some PSAs for the chat. As all of you in the queue already know, we have finished selling our Holo Icon packs. Congratulations to those of you who snagged one. We are coming close to wrapping up our queue for the rebound packs, which are playoff packs. Congratulations to you all for getting into the queue and getting one of those. Please share them on social media. We want to see what you got. In fact, let me see if I could pull something up. Skeets, we may have a wedgie. Someone may have pulled a wedgie.
Oh, fantastic.
Let's see if we can get this
the Anthony
going.
Simons wedgie. The best moment on Top Shot. Everybody knows that. It's a great clip. The block wedgie. Oh, it's so good. It's a deep stick. Everybody just admires it. And here it is. Oh, it's a fantastic. I got 3 of them already, Jacob.
Now, Skeets, do you know, or off the top of your head, is there a wedgie from NBA history that just stands out as the best wedgie?
Well, that's difficult. I will say this. We've been doing live streams, call them the No Dunks Happy Hour. We do them on Thursday nights usually. We were doing them at one point every week. Now it's every 2 weeks. And it's a lot of fun. People join it. It's just like this, right? We just talk about more basketball and we actually talk about a lot of nonsense because all we do is talk about basketball. But anyway, we got into talking about wedgies. And Lee, the guy I do the show with, the Aussie, he somehow, he hasn't even told us, but he has like a wedgie supplier, like this shadowy figure that is hooking him up. And you'll love this, Jacob, with like classic, iconic wedgies. So this person, what I am led to believe, works for the NBA in some vault somewhere with this access to this footage. And we started sharing them on the stream. And we should really like clip them and put them up as their own video. But like there's Michael Jordan wedgies. There's like iconic wedgies in MSG. I believe there's a Magic Johnson. There's a Larry Bird. Like there's all these like from the 80s and early 90s when wedgie wasn't even a thing that he suddenly had all this footage for, and we were like geeking out and going crazy. So it's got to be one of these vintage wedgies would be my favorite, just because not a lot of people have seen them, and we've done a poor job. We got to get them up. But that Simons block is from this season one of the best. Just so. Some of you are very confused, I'm sure, still here in the stream team. But you can go to wedgietracker.com. A fan of ours made this site. It's incredible. And you can watch every single wedgie. We have them all cataloged from the last. It goes back a couple of years now. We've set the all-time record for wedgies in a season this year. We count the playoffs, so we're still counting them. I believe we're up to 58. And, it's been the year of the wedgie. # we are wedgie. So that is a good one that you guys ultimately went with. Your selection. I was very happy with that because we had been talking up on the Top Shot Hot Boys and on No Dunks, like, got to get a wedgie moment. When's it happening? And slick move to make it the block. It was well done.
Yeah, and I know that our team has heard your team's ask around a big beef rebound moment someday.
Yeah. Yes, the rebound pack. That's for true sickos. I mean, wedgie, haha, it's funny. Everybody loves a good basketball wedgie where the ball gets stuck between the rim and the backboard. But yeah, a rebound, a straight up just rebound pack or set or whatever. There's been some fans out there that have done like, you've probably seen it, Jacob, like the mock-up of the art that it looks actually really cool. I think DeAndre Ayton's on the cover for this particular one. But yeah, the possibilities are endless here with all of these moments and what you guys are doing. And can I confirm, I know people were getting playoff packs for rebound packs, Jacob. I just saw a blog post, right, where there are more, like there's going to be a playoff set now, and there are more playoff moments from the first round, and then the second round, and then the conference finals, and then the legendary moments, I believe, in the finals. That'll all encompass one playoff set. Is that correct?
Slight caveat or slight clarifier there. There will be a common playoff set that will have 90 moments from packs and 22 earnable moments. Most of those come through as challenges. When it comes to the conference finals, there will be some moments from that series that make it into the playoff common set. The most epic moments from that series, I anticipate, will make it into a rare set that we are calling "And Then There Were Four."
Oh, okay.
And we actually have some art, JP in the studio hooking it up. Let's watch this.
Is this an exclusive?
This is an exclusive breaking news.
Oh, yes. I'm finally part of an exclusive here. I love it. I guess I was a part of the Wedgie exclusive. You guys let us share that on Twitter there, the Simmons block.
I don't know if there's much to share here. It's just the artwork, but it's going to be a sick pack. And when we were strategizing whether the conference finals justifies having its own rare set, I don't want to suggest that I read this happening, but I do think when it comes to guys like Chris Paul, or at the time when we were kind of making these decisions months ago, Carmelo Anthony, there are a lot of players that their legacy as of right now is never made the finals. So if there was going to be a player that is making their legacy defined by making the finals, we wanted to cover that in a rare set. And that's where "And Then There Were Four" comes in.
Okay.
And, we're getting, hopefully Chris Paul is healthy and able to play, and hopefully we're able to get some of his moments or a moment of his from the conference finals into that set. And if that happens, we'll feel very vindicated for making that decision. Okay. Then similarly, for the finals, we're going to have a legendary set. There will be between 11 and 18 moments in that set. We don't know yet because we don't know how many games it will go.
Right.
If it goes 7 games, we'll need more moments. If it's a sweep, we'll have less. And the best moments from that series presumably will end up in that legendary set. And there will be other moments from that series that end up in the common playoff set. So you as a fan, if you want to get a finals moment, but you don't have necessarily the budget to afford a legendary moment, there will be common moments for you to snag in the marketplace or in those packs.
Okay.
But great question. Glad I was able to do a little clarification there. For you in the chat that are saying, what will the prices be? What will collector score needed be? Frankly speaking, we don't have the answers today. We will give you those answers ahead of time. You will have the ability to work yourself into eligibility for those drops. What I say today, what I've said since we introduced collector score, if you are a collector that wants to position yourself with the best chances of getting into every drop going forward, having a high collector score is the catch-all best way to do it. And we'll have bonuses around the edges for all of these drops, but having a high collector score is the most important thing for you to do to become eligible for all of these drops. And for that, I would say these packs, as you all know, the conference finals have not started yet. So these packs won't be released until that series ends, so that we know all of the moments that need to go into it. And that presumably will happen sometime in around mid-July, I would say, early to mid-July. And then come August, we're going to have the legendary drop. Same concept, right? Same as today. Holo icon, you need a really high collector score to be eligible. Same thing. You're going to need a really high collector score to be eligible for that finals drop. It should come in early August. I think Game 7 of the NBA Finals would come on July 22nd. Give us a little bit of a buffer time to make the editorial decisions of which moments need to make it into that set. And, that will round up Series 2. So pretty exciting stuff. Definitely excited about all of that to come. But community, no reason to try to get rid of your moments today if you know you're going to want to be eligible for those drops coming up soon.
Yeah, that's interesting. So in the addition to, I'm sure, like you said, around the fringes, sort of little bonus bumps that will be coming. It's the set completion bonuses. It's the team bonuses. It's the challenge completions already, bonuses and stuff like that. There is the Cool Cats, the 9 lives bonus and all that. Marketplace bonus. It just goes on and on and on there. There's all these ways to get that collector score up. But it would be wise if you, like you just said, moving forward, knowing that these rare packs are coming, that this other legendary pack are coming in Series 2 to, well, I guess, keep the collector score up as high as possible. All right, good luck to everybody out there. That makes a little more sense. And then that will be a wrap for Series 2. Is that correct?
That's right. And we have some big plans for the summer. Going to go into the archives of history a bit.
Run it back, baby!
Or running it back. No details to share today. You will hear with ample notice of when that pack is going to be released, the year we're running it back to. I can't wait. And community, rest assured, you will have ample notice of what the collector score will be to get into that and how to work yourself into eligibility. And we are certainly looking into the data, the sentiment, and trying to make collector score the very, very, very best system possible to reward active collectors as consistently as possible. And as I said on a stream last night, I'll reiterate here. Originally, we were going to run it back to a year that featured Top Shot debuts from Allen Iverson, Shaquille O'Neal, and Tracy McGrady. That is no longer the plan. When we run it back next time, those 3 will not be included, to my knowledge, in the set. So,
okay.
Gonna let the prognosticators in the community do some guessing around what that could look like, but I can't wait. It's gonna be a ton of fun.
Okay. Have you already been involved in the moments being selected, and of course the players being selected for Run It Back? Is that already the wheels are in motion for all that? I would assume they are.
Wheels are in motion. I mean, as I'm sure you can appreciate, Skeets, it's much easier for us to make a set design around moments that have already happened.
Sure. Yeah.
So we're going to give ourselves ample time to make this the best Run It Back set it can be. We're earmarking some players. We're trying to figure out how we can make it happen. And I'm very excited about what it could look like. Obviously, our community has a passion for basketball that, is not limited to just the 2020 and 21 season. So
right.
Anything we can do to go into the archives is exciting for us. So community, I'm hearing from the producers in the studio, we've wrapped up the queue. We did it.
Done.
Skeets, always just flies by, 90 minutes like that.
I mean, I honestly can't believe we've just been talking for, yeah, you're right. Wow, it's been 90 minutes. We just go through all the NBA news, and it felt like we didn't even touch on half of it because there's so much going on right now. Well, look, it's been awesome. Thanks to everybody in the Top Shot community and the stream team, I like to call you guys, seeing your comments coming through. Congrats to everybody that got the Holo pack, and if you got the playoff pack and you got an Anthony Simons wedgie, tweet at me at JE Skeets on Twitter. I'll see anything that you got from any of your packs, but specifically that Simons wedgie, holler at me or hit me with a hashtag We Are Wedgie at the very least. And if you want to check out the No Dunks podcast, we do it daily, 10 a.m. Eastern, live on YouTube every day, and then it gets flipped around into a podcast. You can search for No Dunks wherever you listen to podcasts. And I basically do what I just did with Jacob every day. And it's a lot of fun. It's a great job just to be able to watch hoops and then talk about basketball for a living. So thanks to some of the No Dunks fans that have also been joining us here today. I see you guys. They're truly the best pod in the business. If you're we're the most consistent pod in the business. If you're an NBA fan and you want to hear hot takes, fun, witty banter, and nonsense at times, No Dunks is where you should go. It's the best. Since the Basketball Jones years ago, I've been an ardent supporter and listener, and Skeets, it's always just humbling and truly I'm just the luckiest guy in the world that I get to talk hoops and get people like you to talk hoops with me. So thank you for taking some time out of your day, man. Absolutely. I really appreciate that. Thanks again to everybody. And maybe we'll see you later on for these packs later on in the summer here, or later on in the playoffs when we get into to the final Series 2 sets there with the rares and the legendaries. Jacob, you take care, man. Likewise. Take care, man. Peace.